The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Those listening here in the chat room and those listening from around the world. If you have questions tonight, you can private chat them to either Ceiling Cat or Jeffrey Gould or myself, Henry Foister. We will get those answered for you. If you are listening from somewhere else around the world, though, and you want to come over to join us, it's paraxradionetwork.com, and just click on the Chat Now button and you'll be in with all these wonderful people. You can talk with them and talk with us. Now, if you do have questions, though, and you're somewhere else around the world, but you don't want to come over to the chat room, you can still send a question to us by sending it to the Paranormal View at, I'm sorry, it's a Paranormal View at gmail.com. There we go. I'll get it out in a minute here. It's been a long week for me, so just bear with us here. We've got a great guest tonight, and we will be getting to him in just a minute. So because there's a lot to actually go over, I'm not really going to go into a whole lot. We have with us Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everybody.
And we got Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And I think what we'll do, Geoff, is just go ahead and have you introduce our guest.
Okay. And by the way, I could hear the opening.
Oh, you could?
Yeah. I was like, whoa. Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So our guest tonight, we had scheduled two guests, and we have one of the two, author Brian Clune, who's the historian for Planet Paranormal Radio and Planet Paranormal Investigations. We also had scheduled Bob Davis, who's a friend of mine, who's a commercial real estate realtor and documentarian, who's the owner of Planet Paranormal Broadcast Network and founder of Planet Paranormal Investigations and such, and the owner of the site QueenMarysShadows.com. So welcome, Brian Clune.
Thank you much. And just so you know, you got the better looking of the two, so you guys made out.
I heard that.
Are you in any of the videos with Bob talking with Jackie?
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty much in all of them.
Oh, okay. Now I have to go back and watch them all.
Well, now.
Yeah, well, Bob and I were actually together when we caught that amazing audio of Jackie. Yeah. We were the only two in the pool.
That blew my mind, the fact that she was audible, not just an EVP.
Now, just let...
Yeah, you know, Bob's actually really good at getting Jackie to talk audibly. I don't know anybody that can coax her out better than he can.
And I just so people knows, I'm sure a lot of people listening doesn't know who Jackie is or where it took place. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to let you know so you can let people know. How's that sound?
Mm-hmm. Jackie is a little girl ghost who's in the pool area of the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. And she's got a sort of protector named Sarah and a male ghost who's not too happy that Bob tends to call Grumpy.
Yeah, Grumpy's a character.
I got my only... Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say, Grumpy just likes to growl at people. He's pretty harmless most of the time, but he does like to scare people just by growling at them. Hence, that's why Bob named him Grumpy.
He's probably frustrated he can't tell people to get off his lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, the only EVP I ever got was in the pool area, in the changing room. Oddly enough, I posted on YouTube that it was one of the female investigators that was down with me had a K2 meter or something, and she was asking Jackie if she could see the lights, and you could hear the echo of the investigator's voice bouncing off the walls, and then all of a sudden there's this voice with no echo, simply saying on this side. It's like, cool. We'll do.
Now, Bob.
Bob is not here.
No, sorry, Brian. Let me scratch that off. Otherwise, I'll be saying Bob all night now.
That's okay. You know what? People call me Bob. Other people call Bob Brian. We're kind of used to it, so it's not. We're kind of a package deal most of the time.
Well, you guys wrote this book, Haunted Universal Studios. I think when you first start reading the book, I mean, you go into the history and detail of Universal Studios. So why don't you start off a little bit with the history of it, how it got started and everything?
Well, one of the things that I like to make sure people realize is that we really wouldn't have the Hollywood we know today if it hadn't been for Carl Laemmle and Universal Studios. There were studios back then, but nothing like what Laemmle created when he built Universal City. And a lot of people don't know that at the time that Laemmle was in the process of building the studio, he was also battling Thomas Edison, who had a monopoly when it came to cameras, film. Edison got together with Kodak, and it was Laemmle who actually broke the monopoly that Kodak and Edison had created. And without that, it would be a completely different set of circumstances that we have in Hollywood today. Also, one of the things that most people don't realize is that any main street in the United States on Halloween night would be completely different without Universal Studios and their monster pantheon. Dracula, the Mummy, Frankenstein's monster, all of what we see on Halloween night, those characters actually came from Universal Studios. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Also part of the history is the fact that before talkies, Carl Laemmle wanted to make sure that people could see how the movies were being made. So he would allow guests to just come in and watch all of the filming. They would actually urge people to cheer for their heroes, boo the villains. But unfortunately then when sound came into the picture and Carl Laemmle really fought hard to not go into the trend of talking films, but him and his son both realized later that they had to. But when talkies came in, that pretty much put an end to people going and watching the films. And it wasn't until the early 1960s that started again. So that's kind of just a brief synopsis of the history of how the studio came to be an amusement park and a little bit of the history of the movie studio itself.
So now, you guys, neither one of you work at Universal, right?
No. However, are you guys familiar with Sid Schultz? He wrote the foreword for the book. He was part of Pasadena Paranormal, and he also worked with the Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, I met him a long time ago.
Yeah, Sid's a great guy, by the way. And He actually worked at Universal Studios and played the part of Deacon, the head bad guy in the Waterworld show. And when we were talking to Sid about writing the book, and he mentioned that, both Bob and I were like extremely jealous of the fact that Sid actually is one of the only people I know that have been able to go and investigate sections of Universal Studios.
Really?
And as far as I know, he's the only one so far that has been allowed to do that.
Well,
and yes, I'm jealous.
yeah, that's interesting, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they still making movies at Universal, or is it now just turned into a total theme park?
Oh no, they still make movies. It's mainly on the back lot. The amusement park area, not so much, but the lower lot, and that's down where the Mummy ride and where Soundstage 28 used to be. Unfortunately, they tore the soundstage down, but that is still fairly close to where they're still making movies. So they still have sound stages. They, if you take the tram tour of the back lot, it's never the same tour because they're constantly having to change the route to avoid filming. So you will still, run across some of your favorite actors and actresses on the back lot of Universal Studios. So yeah, they still do make movies there.
And the thing is that all the different tram operators, although they technically follow a script, they're allowed to sort of like put their own spin on certain things.
Well, they actually pretty much have to. One of the key components of the tour guides is their ability to ad lib and change, because they could go on one tram tour, come back into the station, load up with different passengers, go back out and have it be completely different than the time before. And then the next time it could be completely different again, depending on the film schedules. So the tour guides themselves are put through an amazing test to see if they can handle the job. It's not just reading a script and saying, this is where this is where this is. There are some of the attractions that are always on the tour, like the King Kong,
3D.
I don't even know what you'd call it.
The 3D
like a sound stage that they, right. So those are always set in stone. Those are. But the rest of the tour is not. So you never know if they're going to be able to go through 5 Points, which is the western section, or they may have to veer around and not actually even do part of the Amity Island section. They'll go past the Bruce the Shark, but they may have to veer off in one direction rather than the other direction that they're normally supposed to go. So they really never know from one drive-through where they're going to be. So it's really incredible what the tour guides do. I have a lot of respect for them.
There was a time that Elm Street was open, but now it's become a cul-de-sac and they have a facade at the very bottom of it. So the trams always go by Elm Street. And I worked on a couple of films on Elm Street, including the Garfield movie, where since I had tons of time on my hand, I just took a chair up towards the top where the tram would go by, and I'd be the only thing they could see. And they'd point out that, that Garfield was being shot, and, and they realized I was playing a milkman. So they, all these people were taking photos of me, which is
now, is Elm Street what they now call Wisteria Lane, where the Munster House was? And
that's farther along. This is like right across. It's right across from the little whorehouse in Texas.
Oh, okay.
The chicken ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you go around, as you come through Bruce the Shark, and they make a left, and they're going up the hill, look to the left, and you'll see a street that goes straight down. And you might see the top of a facade building or something, but generally they just keep going up because they can't go down. They used to, like I said, they used to go down. They'd go around the Court of Miracles.
Right.
Wow, it's amazing. I remember all this. I've worked on Universal a lot. Well, you know I'm an actor, right, Brian?
Actually, I did not know that, but I do now.
Yeah. I am an actor my whole life, and I've worked on episodes of Ghost Whisperer by the green area near the giant the pool where they have the cyclorama where they film Jaws and such.
Right.
And yeah, I worked on the clock tower Times Square and such like that, and so I had a lot of fun.
Very nice. I wish I would have known that when we were writing the book. We'd have gotten in contact with you and asked you a whole bunch of questions.
Well, Bob knows me, and he knows I'm an actor, and he knows, so I'm surprised, when I found out about this, I'm like, oh, I would have known about that. I actually ate breakfast one of the days in Garfield in the haunted soundstage that still had the set from Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. Now, luckily, from what I understand, they did pull the set out. So the set has been saved, but the soundstage itself is now gone, unfortunately.
Oh, because I understand they actually were using around it when they did Grinch. Some of the interiors, they used that soundstage, but they didn't touch the opera set.
Well, the entire Soundstage 28 has now been completely torn down.
Well,
part of it is being used for the Transformers ride, but the Phantom, or I should say the opera set, they have removed it and it's in storage. They're just not sure what they're going to do with it at the moment.
Yeah, right.
But hopefully they'll, that's one of the things that's really good about Universal, is that they are keenly aware of their history, and they're one of the only studios that's been really good about trying to save their historic sets and things like that, where unfortunately, like MGM in Culver City, when Sony bought it out, they completely demolished sections where Terra from Gone with the Wind was set, and that's all been turned into condominiums and homes now. But Universal's been really good and conscientious about trying to save the history of the studio, and hopefully that will continue.
Well, even Hollywood Studios and Warner Brothers at least have these giant plaques outside the door of the soundstages saying what projects that were famous had been shot in there, like different TV shows and movies and such.
Right. Yeah. One of these days, Bob and I are probably going to start working on like a haunted movie studio book, because it seems like most of them in Hollywood do have a lot of haunting activity at them. And I just think it'd be fascinating to do the research on that. And one of the things I found out when doing Haunted Universal is Raleigh Studios used to be Clune Studios, and I keep wondering, I wonder if I have any relatives that owned it.
Well, Raleigh Studios I'm familiar with. Of course, that's right across the street from Paramount. So,
now when you was doing the opening of the book and the history of a little bit of Universal, one of the first hauntings that you had in there was about Peg and Twistle and the Hollywood sign.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Some people may not know what exactly happened with her. You want to talk on that?
Well, Peg had come to Hollywood to make it as a big-time actress. She had done some Broadway and some smaller stage productions, but she really wanted to make it big in Hollywood. She was not having a whole lot of success, and then, ironically, she tried out for a part and figured that she wasn't going to get it because she hadn't heard back from the people. And she was also suffering from depression. So in a state of depression and not getting the job, she climbed to the top of the Hollywood sign and threw herself off. But if she'd have waited just one more day, she would have found out that she was accepted for the big part that she was trying for, and she may have never gone through with her suicide if she'd have waited just a little bit longer. This is one of the reasons why I always say suicide is nothing but doing a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes. Now, they say that that's haunted. So has people seen her around the sign or somewhere else around Universal?
Or on the sign?
She hasn't really been seen at Universal, and I'm not sure she ever actually worked for Universal, but she has been seen around the Hollywood sign, actually quite a few times. Unfortunately, the city of LA is closing down the Hollywood sign, so it's getting very difficult to get up there. So the amount of reports coming in of Peg Entwistle still being seen, felt, heard around the Hollywood sign are starting to diminish, but that's coming not necessarily from her lack of being there, but for people not being able to get to it.
Well, she's also been seen down in the trails, down like Beechwood Canyon area.
I wasn't aware of that. Because I didn't do a whole lot of research into Peg Entwistle, although it is something that we've been thinking about. I don't know if you guys are familiar with my book, Hollywood Obscura, but we're thinking about doing another book along those lines, and Peg Entwistle will most likely be a part of it. And if that's the case, then believe me, I'll be doing a lot of research on that poor woman.
Oh yeah, actress tragedies are just like a dime a dozen down there. Like the Black Dahlia, she was also kind of a failed actress.
She was. I actually have the Black Dahlia in Hollywood Obscura. And when I was doing my research on Elizabeth Short, one of the things that really surprised me was how, how the media has portrayed Elizabeth Short. She has basically become more of a caricature of who she actually was, rather than people portraying her as. She was more of a lost little girl rather than this starlet wannabe who slept around, and I mean, none of that actually occurred with her.
Right.
So, yeah, I kind of feel bad for Elizabeth Short and what people think she is when she actually isn't.
Oh yeah, she's buried up here in Mountain View, and I still go put a flower on her grave every now and then.
Aww.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you one thing. The murderer was not a man by the name of Hodel.
The police officer?
Yeah.
Or was that the...
And I did not come up with this theory. It was a retired Los Angeles Times investigative reporter by the name of Hirsch, and he got together with an FBI profiler, and I'm pretty sure that the person named in Hollywood Obscura as Elizabeth Short's murderer is the actual murderer. And that, like I said, that doesn't come from me. That comes from these two individuals that, I mean, they just were obsessed with Elizabeth Short's murder. And Mr. Hirsch actually is still alive, and it was a real pleasure to talk to him. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the person that mentioned in Hollywood Obscura is the actual murderer, and it's so far from Mr. Hodel. And unfortunately, Hodel just hated his father, and that's the main reason that he accused him of being the Black Dahlia's killer.
Makes sense.
Now, did they, at Universal, do they try to downplay places that might be haunted there, or is that part of their drawing card also?
Well, I cannot answer that in any definitive way. One of the things that Bob and I do is before we start writing about a place, we always contact them to let the location know. And with Universal Studios, we actually gave them full editorial control over the book. In other words, if there was something that we wrote that they didn't want us to put in it, we would have removed it. If there was something that they wanted us to add to the book, we would have put it in. Because for us, it doesn't do anybody any good if you don't tell the truth, if that makes sense. So we're not out to make a place look bad. We're not out to make a place look good. We're just out to give our readers the truth. Now, unfortunately, Universal Studios would not deal with us at all. They didn't have a problem with us writing the book. They just wouldn't help us with it. So the first time we went there, we were talking pretty much the entire trip. We were actually there with Bob's new son-in-law who had never been there, and his daughter. And we were supposed to go out and have a good time, but we were busy talking to all the employees. Hey, do you have any ghost stories? And we received a boatload of stories from the employees. Now, as we continued to go back, we noticed that the employees were starting to not at first recognize us, but when we would ask questions, they would start clamming up. So whether the studio was telling them, look, there's going to be some guys there talking about ghosts, we would prefer it if you don't, we're not really sure, but it got to the point where it was getting harder and harder for us to get employees to talk about it. Now, there were some who were just like, all, yes, I want to tell you my story. And then there were others who would literally turn around and walk away as if they were in fear. So we're not really sure how Universal is regarding their ghosts, but they don't actively try to say that it's not haunted, if that makes any sense.
Wow.
Yeah, so they don't want to publicly endorse it, and God only knows what kind of non-disclosure agreements they have with their employees, but that's probably
that's Disney. But yeah, I don't think that they have any non-disclosure agreements that they force their employees to fill out. But you know, one of a good case in point, one of the locations that we were told about, the production store, we went back to talk about the chocolate frogs that supposedly jump off the shelves. The manager came over when we were talking to one of the employees and took over the conversation and told us that the only reason that the chocolate frogs were ending up on the floor was because they were chocolate, and when it would get hot, the chocolate would expand, and when it would get cold, the chocolate would contract, and that was causing them to jump off the shelves. And both Bob and I were kind of looking at the woman and going, we believe that. So,
yeah, that's real science right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I think when you're talking about the chocolate heating up and expanding, that's called melting.
Yeah.
But we, you know.
To me,
we just smiled and went, thank you.
I could believe the chocolate melting and sliding off the shelves easier than I could the other way. Yeah, you know.
These weren't the Harry Potter chocolate frogs, were they?
Well, yeah, they actually were,
okay.
but they were not in the Harry Potter themed area. Yeah, they're magical. Exactly.
Exactly. I mean, how often my Hershey's Kisses just go leaping around the room like Mexican jumping beans? Come on.
Well, that actually depends on how desperate my wife is for chocolate, but we won't go into that.
Now, I guess did they have the grand opening in 1915 for Universal?
Correct. Technically it was a big 2-day event, but because Carl Laemmle loved pageantry, it actually lasted a lot more than 2 days. The 2 days was specifically just at Universal Studios, but what he did is he started all of his guests off in Chicago and gave them a train trip to LA with a bunch of different stops along the way to Universal movie theaters that were owned and Wild West shows and things like that. And then when they got into Los Angeles, that is when the real grand opening started. Carl Laemmle just literally went to the nines with everything. I mean, he just spent a small fortune making sure that people would remember the opening of Universal Studios. And that's actually where the first ghost that we know of was created. Created sounds kind of funny, but you know what I mean. At the studio. And that was a pilot by the name of Frank Stites. And that happened the second day of opening day ceremonies. Frank was supposed to perform on day one, but the wind came up and he couldn't actually take off and do what he needed to do. That combined with one of his friends who was one of a great aviator and stunt pilot had died a few days earlier up in San Francisco. And so Frank canceled his stunt on day one, but performed the stunt on day two. Now, the problem was that Stites was supposed to swoop in his biplane and attack another aircraft that was on a wire. And he was supposed to swoop down, attack it, and toss a bomb at it. The bomb itself was just a sack of flour, but there were explosives packed into the dummy aircraft. So when Frank dropped the bag of flour, when it neared the dummy aircraft, the technician hit the switch, the dummy aircraft blew up beautifully, but they misjudged how much dynamite to put in the other aircraft.
Oops.
The explosion was so massive that it caused Stites' aircraft to lose control. He couldn't regain control of the aircraft, and instead of riding the airplane into the ground, which may have saved his life, we don't know, he decided to jump out at 60 feet above the earth. When he hit the ground, he was killed instantly.
Yeah, they didn't have parachutes.
Go ahead.
It's not about the fall, it's the bouncing.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the bouncing. Now, over the years, people had said something about seeing an aviator, but there wasn't anything conclusive about it. Then one of the producers in the 90s was scouting the backlot for a night version of Halloween Horror Nights. I'm sorry, it was in the 2000s. And came across what he realized was a ghost. Now, that's as far as I'm going to go with the story, but the end of the story is he came up with an idea to put a mannequin near where he saw the ghost. As soon as the mannequin was put there, the ghost disappeared. However, anytime somebody moves the mannequin that is dressed like a early 1900s pilot, the ghost comes back. So they have to keep this mannequin in a certain area, and it just happens to be the area where Stite's body fell, or else the ghost comes back. So apparently Frank just wants to make sure he's remembered.
Wow. So there has been numerous people that's seen it, the body, seen Stites.
There have been, but like I said, as long as that mannequin is there, no one sees the ghost, no one feels the ghost. It's like he is content to do whatever he does without bothering the living. So the only time that after this producer saw the ghost, it only happened one time since, and that was when another employee removed the mannequin, dressed it like a monster, put it somewhere else, and some of the scare actors who were working in that area got scared themselves because they kept seeing Stites, and the mannequin was put back and has been there ever since. So unfortunately, no one sees Frank much anymore, but Frank seems like he's happy at least.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I know you, in the early part of the book, you talk about all the different actors and actresses that had made movies there in Universal. And one of them that you talk about is Lucille Ball, and because they filmed her show there, her TV series. Now, people sees her a lot, though.
I'm pretty sure Lucy was on Paramount. Desilu was over at Paramount, wasn't it?
Desilu was.
Yeah, right. Desilu was at Paramount, but they filmed one of Lucy's sitcoms at Universal.
Oh, like the later
and
on
actually,
Lucy with Gail Gordon, that one?
I'm trying to remember which one it was, but believe it or not, back then the studios would actually use each other's locations. So, like Gone with the Wind was filmed on MGM, but if I remember correctly, it wasn't an MGM movie. It was a Warner Brothers. So they would actually use each other's, not only stars, because they would lend each other their stars, but they would actually use their studios. So, I mean, it wasn't unheard of. Like Desilu Studios was actually on Paramount Studios property. So even though it was Desilu Studios, it was actually at Paramount. So, but yeah, so Lucy was one of Lucy's sitcoms was filmed at Universal Studios down near the lower lot area. I hear doggies.
Yeah, the pack is so near their corral.
Yeah, they're not mine. I got kitty cats. Well, now, one of the places there where they did a lot was Soundstage 28, and that place was supposed to be fairly active. I guess Lon Chaney's one of the big actors that had a lot, did a lot there, I guess, and is probably seen quite a bit.
Yeah, well, he was, but unfortunately, like I said, the studio itself has been torn down. The soundstage has been torn down, and there actually haven't been any reports of Lon Chaney since. I know I was kind of wondering because there are some minor reports of spirits in the Transformer ride, which is actually part of Soundstage 28 was built into that particular ride. So I'm kind of wondering whether the reports that we're getting from the Transformer ride might have something to do with Lon Chaney, but because it's a dark ride, he may not actually even be seen, even though he's there. So it's one of those things that, it's a possibility that he's still there, but unfortunately the majority of the soundstage was torn down. But when Soundstage 28 was still in existence, there were quite a bit of reports. Now, Jeffrey, did you say you were part of Ghost Whisperer?
I did an episode of Ghost Whisperer, yes.
Okay, because I know when we were doing research, we came across reports from that show. Because I guess Ghost Whisperer used to use Soundstage 28 quite a bit during filming, and the actors, actresses.
Hang on, I got kicked off, and I didn't hear almost anything after you asked me about.
You're still on, Geoff.
Okay, yeah. Right after I said I'd worked on it, I missed everything you said. God.
All right. So what I was saying is that when we were doing research, we got a lot of reports of actors and actresses and crew members from Ghost Whisperer having paranormal activity happening to them during filming of the show. Because I guess they used Soundstage 28 quite a bit during the filming for that.
Well, I wasn't. My scenes were outside. I was in one of the alleys of New York Street. I was photo doubling for David Paymer, and the episode was called "A Grave Matter," where his character had been misidentified and was in the wrong grave, and his death was that he was struck by lightning while carrying a can of gasoline to fill his car, and he was just charred to a crisp. So during the week, they made me up to look like him, both as kind of regular, partially singed, and completely fried. So I looked like bacon. It was awesome. And what they had me do was, like I say, at one point you see me kind of standing, so you sort of see like the 3/4 of me, but so it looks like you're looking at David Paymer, and she addresses me, and the camera pans with her, and so it looks like he teleports in front of her. And then later, after he's killed, his ghost is looking down on his body, and I'm the body laying on the ground in the rain, the fake rain, at 1 a.m, very cold. The episode was directed by Eric LaSalle. He was kind enough to have them, when he realized that I was completely freezing, he said, "Oh, we have to do something for our poor photo double." And it would have been nicer if he'd give me a day player contract, but he tagged $500 onto my voucher, which was nice.
That's nice. Yeah, definitely. I mean, hell, they only froze you.
Oh, exactly. Well, after the first take, it was fine. They just dropped a wool blanket on me. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then the second time, the leaves and everything had gotten soaked, and my clothes were all soaked. So all the big thick wool blanket did was press the cold clothing onto my chest. I was like, that's not going to work anymore. So essentially, since I knew it was a close-up on my face, I was just clenching my fists and just trying not to move.
Yeah, I hear you. But yeah, so one of the things that I got a kick out of with doing the research for Soundstage 28 were the reports of Lon Chaney wandering the catwalks carrying a chandelier. And I just kept thinking, why on earth would this guy be carrying a chandelier?
Yeah.
Now, the only chandelier that he would have any reason to carry was the one being used in the Phantom of the Opera, right. But it weighed something like 600 pounds.
Yeah, kind of huge.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering, and we put it in the book, that we all know how when tales are told, they get bigger and bigger and they kind of expand on themselves. And I'm thinking that probably what started off as a candelabra, probably over how many tellings became a chandelier. But if you think of it as a candelabra, it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how many people are aware of Lon Chaney and
Senior.
back when Lon Chaney Sr., correct. Back when Lon Chaney was doing Phantom of the Opera, it was required of all actors and actresses to do their own makeup. So if you look at Eric, the Phantom that Lon Chaney created, it's still the most iconic Phantom of the Opera. I mean, everybody looks at that and goes, "Oh, that's the Phantom of the Opera." Now, if you can picture that in your head and try and picture his nose as Eric the Phantom, and you realize just how big his nostrils were. The way Lon Chaney did that, every time I think about it, it just kind of makes me cringe. He actually fashioned hooks, and he put one hook in each nostril, ran a wire up through the bridge of his nose, across his eyebrows, and down over his ears, and then pulled it as tight as he could, and then tied it off, and then put makeup over it so you couldn't see the wires and the hooks.
Ouch.
The amount of pain this man had to have been in while filming that, to me, is just like, wow. But when I found that out, it gave me a whole... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he endured pain with almost every one of those special makeups he did.
Yeah.
Like Hunchback of Notre Dame and all that.
Exactly. But, I mean, the one... I mean, just thinking about hooks in my nostrils just makes me full of pain just thinking about it.
Yep.
But yeah, he was definitely earned his nickname of Man of 1,000 Faces.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, even something, he was beyond method. I mean, one of his lesser-known film called Shadows, in which he played, and I don't know if they'd ever air it again because it's, by today's PC standards, everyone would be like, oh my God, that's so, they would consider it racist. But he played a Chinese laundroman, and a very stereotypical one. But he walked with this deliberate broken back look. He was always stooped forward as though he had been working with laundry so long it had just worn away his posture. And that always blew me away, the way he was able to transpose his body in certain ways to make a character work.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know, but Lon Chaney's parents were both deaf.
Mm-hmm.
So Chaney had to, as he grew up, he had to sign everything to his parents, and he would actually have to pantomime a lot of different things to get what the meaning across to his parents. So he actually started off, as a young boy with his parents, learning how to do all of that. Not the makeup part, but the acting, especially back during the silent era.
Yeah.
Just as a matter of need for his parents. So, he grew up that way. And then to come up with it, with all of this brilliant makeup that he came up with is just, to me, was just incredible. Unfortunately, his son really couldn't act, but,
Hey, I love the werewolf, Wolfman.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do. I actually have it on my DVR saved so I can watch it whenever I want. But yeah, it was just.
It was Claude Rains. You could see him.
Yeah. Now I don't know whether, and I do mention it in the book a few times, where Universal's monsters are concerned.
Yeah.
If you notice how Universal did all of their monsters, they were not these vicious, have to kill everything in sight type of creatures. If you actually read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's monster,
mm-hmm.
it is so far from what we know from the movies that you wouldn't even realize that they're the same creature. But Universal seems to have made all of their monsters, at least up until the nuclear age, the nuclear scare, more sympathetic to the audiences. They wanted the audiences to be scared, not necessarily terrified, but they also wanted them to relate emotionally to the monster. And one of the good things about that, well, let me back up. The Bride of Frankenstein is actually a good one to bring that out, because if you ever watch The Bride of Frankenstein, the least monstrous of all of the characters was the Frankenstein's monster. The humans were much worse than the monster was. And at the end of the film, it took the monster to save everybody. So
although he was a little less violent in the first film, oddly enough, he was much more of a pathetic creature with his hands out and almost begging for help. I mean, Carla
begging for help, begging for friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact,
I mean, even when
am I correct that I've always thought Bride of Frankenstein might have been the first movie sequel?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was. And one of the things that I get a kick out of, Elsa Lanchester was unnamed, so she was given no credit for it at all.
Well, they gave her the credit as Mary Shelley at the beginning, didn't they? Pretty sure they did.
No, she was uncredited for that, and I believe she was only in it for I think it was something like 7 minutes.
I'm going to have to look that up, because I'm pretty sure
but everybody knows exactly who she is just by looks.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I found that rather interesting.
Plus, she made out pretty well in the books. The bride was never created. He destroyed the creature before reanimating her in the book.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do. I think what we're going to do is go ahead and take us a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about haunted Universal Studios and things that's supposed to be going on there. And I'm sure if you got questions, you can send them to us. Send it to Ceiling Cat, H. Foister, or Jeffrey's not in anymore. So, but we will get to that.
All right.
It'll be about a couple minutes. So, Geoff, you want to take us out?
Yep, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with host Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with our guest Brian Clune and not Bob Davis. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the Parax Radio Network. I want to thank everybody again for tuning in with us tonight. Hope you're enjoying the show. And we have with us Barbara Duncan.
I'm still here.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And I'm sure we have thousands of listeners from all around the world. Is that right, Barbara?
Well, certainly they're coming in from all over the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France has joined us.
All right. And I want to welcome back our special guest, Brian Clune, who is the
still
author.
Here.
Yeah. I guess you're co-author of Haunted Universal Studios?
Correct.
Okay.
And by the way, I looked it up, and indeed, she is credited as Mary Shelley, but not as the monster's mate. At the very bottom, it says monster's mate, ... question mark.
Okay, I stand corrected.
That's okay. Mandela effect and all that.
That's okay. That just means I learned something.
It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite Universal films. Also, I love the musical score. I think it was also maybe the first one that had a musical score, apart from being the first sequel, because up to Frankenstein, the first movie has no music. It's just film. Here it is, people walking around.
Really? You know what? I've seen that film, God, probably 100 times. I never noticed that.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing how when you get into a story, everything else just seems to kind of disappear.
Exactly.
Wow. Now, Barbara, I know you read the book, and you've probably got 1,000 questions too. So,
by the way, Barbara, if you didn't like the book, blame Bob. If you liked it, it's.
Well, I haven't been to Universal Studios, as I was talking to Geoff, since the late 1980s. So it's been quite a while, and I know the studio's changed quite a bit. But even back then, with the creepy, the bridge, the breakaway bridge, I call it, which was, I think, close to the Bates Motel set. I have no idea how much is left. Yeah.
Well, the Bates Motel and Mother's House have been moved. You know what? I lost count of how many times those have been moved. The bridge, however, is still there, but it is no longer in use as part of the tour. So, but it is still part of the tour as far as you drive by and they point it out and explain what it is, what it used to do. So it is still present, just not in use.
Yeah, I was one of
that
the
was
lucky
actually one of my favorites too.
I was one of the lucky ones who could drive. I was on one of the tour buses that got to go over that thing.
Oh, I used to, back in the old days, I used to do that all the time.
Fine. Awesome.
Now, I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering how many people remember Prop Plaza.
Prop Plaza.
It was a little area. It was halfway through the tram tour, and you would get off of the tram, and you'd go and get some lunch, and you'd walk around this little tiny area, and you'd look at a bunch of props that they would have, and then you'd get back onto a different tram and continue on with your tram tour.
And they would have people dressed up as different, whatever movie happened to be popular at the time.
Yeah, not at first, but yeah, they did slowly start to bring that in. And it was back before really there were any rides. Once you got off the tram and you were finished with it, then you would just kind of walk around and shop and look at, they had the Warlord's Tower. I don't know if you remember that. I actually miss all of those old things that they used to have there that kind of made it more of a studio feel rather than an amusement park feel.
Right.
So you kind of felt more like you were part of the movies rather than just part of an amusement park.
I think when I was there last, they allowed people to dress up and go on the Enterprise set for those Trekkies out there in the world.
Yes, I actually did that. My brother and I were in that little stage show, and somewhere I have the VHS that they sold us for much more than they probably should have charged.
Yeah.
Now, I'm actually a Trekkie, but unfortunately I missed all of that. So there was a huge stretch where I didn't go to Universal Studios. And it wasn't until I had my own kids, and that must have been in the early to mid 90s. And then they were kind of bored with it, so we actually never went back until the late 2000s. And by then everything had changed so drastically that it wasn't even the same. Still fun though.
Well, I remember back when they not only stopped the tram for I don't remember lunch, unless I was a VIP tour, but they had different sound stages set up to do like how Foley works and how rear projection and or green screen worked and such like that.
Right. And they actually used to take you through some of the dressing rooms, and Lucille Ball's dressing room was one of them. They would take you through Alfred Hitchcock's office, some of the other dressing rooms. They would take you into this basement, which I always thought was kind of creepy. It's like, why are you taking us into a basement? This is supposed to be fun. So, yeah, I do remember the old days.
So how much did the fires of the last couple of years affect Universal Studios?
Well, none of them really affected them all that much, except for the one fire that took out the archive section. Now, they were copies, so none of the originals burned, but there was one film, and for some reason my brain is not working on which film it was, that got destroyed, and they did not have an original. Now, a search turned up another copy somewhere in Europe that Universal acquired. So luckily, nothing was lost, nothing catastrophic. So it was basically more money than anything else, other than the original King Kong. The
animatronic.
The animatronic, yeah. The new King Kong event is okay. I'm not really big on 3D. I much prefer the original animatronic King Kong. But unfortunately, that was lost in the fire. So
yep.
We'll never see King Kong like that again.
But at least the thing about what did I do here? With the animated 3D one they have is actually got some amusing elements to it, including but not limited to, they add an extra car in the projection, so you're watching the dinosaurs eating passengers.
Yeah, that is kind of amusing, I have to admit. Especially when, guys, oh my Lord, I must have gone on that tour now 30 or 40 times while writing the book, because we kept going and, okay, hey, we're going to go need this picture. We need to go talk to this person. So every time we'd go, we'd hop on the tram and snap pictures, and then we'd go through it. And all right, we'll use this one in the book. And the one thing I always noticed was there is always some kids in that tram that are so into the 3D that they don't realize that it's just a movie, and they start to panic. And we had one kid literally almost jump out of the tram trying to get away from, I believe it was a dinosaur that is eating the the guests. So I know I shouldn't be amused at kids panicking, but sometimes,
Sometimes it just
kind of adds to
for it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so talking about ghosts, because I know that it seems to be that there's a heck of a lot of haunted theaters out there. And I think it's just the repetition of actors being on stage constantly that they tend to haunt theaters. What is it about studios that makes them so haunted? Is it the type of people, the actors that are there? Is it the directors that are there, producers?
I think it's a combination. One of the things that I noticed with doing the research for Haunted Universal and doing the research for Hollywood Obscura is Hollywood is a dream for a lot of people, but it also turns into a nightmare for a lot of people. So Peg Entwistle is a good case in point. She committed suicide because she was afraid she wasn't going to make it in Hollywood. And the fact that she couldn't make it caused her to kill herself, and that act alone, I think, is the reason that she is still at the Hollywood sign. And whether she's an intelligent haunting or just an imprint, hopefully one of these days we'll find out. But so you have that aspect of actors and actresses that didn't make it. Then you also have those actors and actresses who so dearly loved the work, loved the adulation of the fans, that they don't want that to end. I think Lucille Ball is a good case for that, and I'm not saying that she loved the adulation or anything, but she loved what she could bring to the audience. So she was very into her fans. And from everything that I've learned while doing the research is that she still likes to joke with the living. So she's not actually out to scare people. She's actually still out trying to make them laugh, which was a fantastic gift of hers. Then you also have a very, the people don't really think about are the people behind the scenes. You have grips and woodworkers and lighting guys and just all of these people that put their heart and soul into creating the atmosphere that the actors go into to flesh out. And a lot of those people dearly love what they do. And one of the spirits at Soundstage 28, everybody knows about Lon Chaney, but there is also at least one stagehand who is known to, or was known, I should say, because the soundstage is gone, who was known to just continue on doing his job. He would be seen moving lights around, not actually moving the lights themselves, but spectral lights, I guess you could call them, doing his job and just going about his work. So I think it's a combination of people's despair, people's love, and people's dedication that just kind of all mesh into this one area that's known as Hollywood. At least that's my theory.
It would be kind of great to run into the ghost of Harpo Marx.
But yeah, it would. And I have heard that he might be at what is now Jim Henson Studios.
On La Brea?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the old Charlie Chaplin Studios.
Because I hear
Don't
that
quote me on that, but
yeah, I hear that one's quite haunted.
Yeah,
one of the first commercials I ever shot was actually at the Mack Sennett Studios, or what was formerly the Mack Sennett Studios, over in Silver Lake.
The Max what?
Mack Sennett, Keystone Cops people, Oliver Hardy, all that. Stan Laurel.
I feel bad. I'm not actually even familiar with that.
Oh,
darn it!
You don't know? Well, you know who Mack Sennett was, right?
I've heard the name. Yes.
He created the Little Rascals. He created the Keystone Cops. He created. I think he's the one that actually paired up Laurel and Hardy.
Wow. All right. I'm going to have to write that down. And you know what? You know what I'm going to be doing now when the radio show's over, right?
Getting my information, I guess. My friends have my nickname is Badger. It's my spirit animal, and my friends have a saying, "This is why you have a badger." This arcane, completely pointless, useless, trivial knowledge.
You know what? No knowledge is pointless and useless. And you know what? I need to get your telephone number.
No problem. Oh, okay. I've sent you an ad request on Facebook, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I like to say that I'm a wealth of useless knowledge, and I'm always willing to know more useless knowledge.
Wow.
So now your investigation group, and I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get too off topic, is actually in Orange County. One of the papers
I live in the South Los Angeles area, and then Bob lives down in the Irvine area. Now, we used to have two other members of our group, a husband and wife, and at one point they lived up in Pleasanton, California. Then they moved back down here, but unfortunately, Ash committed suicide, and his wife then got remarried, had a baby, and kind of, well, we all know it's kind of hard dealing with a baby and trying to hunt ghosts at the same time. So it's basically just Bob and I now.
Oh, I would think a baby would be a great way to know there's a ghost right next to you.
You would think.
You'd think, yeah.
Wow.
Now, I'm up in the Little Armenia area where I'm staying with friends up near Santa Monica Boulevard, Fountain, between Western and Normandy. Whereabouts South Los Angeles? Because that's kind of a broad brushstroke there.
Oh, I'm in I live in Torrance.
Oh, that's south. Yeah, okay,
South,
yeah.
South. That's
wow.
what he said. South.
Yeah. I'm like a 10-minute drive to the Queen Mary. So,
oh, okay, yeah. You're in come visit, come armed neighborhood. So.
No, not at all.
Oh, really? I always thought Torrance was one of the lesser safe neighborhoods.
No, not at all. It's actually upper middle class.
Oh, okay.
Now, has either of you, Brian or Bob, ever had a ghost experience while you've been at Universal?
Unfortunately, no. But the amount of stories we received from the employees themselves before we think they were told, stop talking to them, it was just off the hook. Now, Sid did have some experiences while he worked there, again, making us extremely jealous. But he was actually one of the more famous ghosts at Universal is a little girl who originally started off in the Back to the Future ride, and it's now the Simpsons ride, and she's apparently still there. And Sid actually spotted her on one of the monitors. And so, that was one of the reasons why we were so excited when Sid agreed to write the foreword for the book. Because here we had somebody who we know is a great investigator, somebody who doesn't make things up to try and further his own career or whatever you want to call it, who actually had things happen to him while working at Universal Studios. So it kind of gave us a little bit of grounding in the fact that, okay, yeah, maybe the stories that the employees are telling us are, in fact, happening. So it kind of helped round things out, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I have to ask, what is probably the most outrageous story that the employees told you?
The most outrageous... That's a good one. Probably the one from the store Jurassic Outfitters. One of the stories that an employee told us, and it is in the book, about how this mist sort of creeped into the store, and how once the mist was starting to clear, how everything just sort of jumped off the shelves. I just kind of found that story a bit over the top. I'm not going to say it didn't happen, and it may have been a variation of something that happened. But you know, it's one of the things that we don't censor people. If they tell us a story, we take it, you know, and we write for entertainment rather than you know, which is why you'll notice we never put this actually happened or there actually are ghosts or this. We just try and bring what people tell us have happened to them at a location. So that one to me was probably one of the more fantastic stories that we were told. Another one was at one of the stores up in the upper section of Universal Studios, where a mannequin would constantly turn. That one.
Okay.
As long as it didn't have wings and was gray and you only moved when you blinked.
Oh, that guy scares me. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those stories, you know, I found a lot of them fascinating, especially the ones from City Walk. A lot of people wouldn't think that City Walk would have any paranormal activity because it's so modern. But we were really surprised at how many people there were, you know, telling us about things that happened. Case in point, we were actually having lunch at a Mexican restaurant there called Camacho's Cantina, and one of the waiters had overheard us talking, and he just comes up and he goes, "You know, the restaurant's haunted, right?" And we hadn't even thought to ask, to be perfectly honest with you. And we're like, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "Yeah, as soon as I bring you your food and I have some time, I'll tell you about it." And sure enough, he came over. Luckily, the place wasn't that crowded, and he gave us the stories that are in a couple of the stories that are in the book about Camacho's Cantina. And before we even left the restaurant, one of the managers comes up and goes, "Hey, as soon as you're done with your lunch, come and talk to me." So we're like, "All right." So we were done with lunch. We went over there and talked to him, and he goes, "All right, now come over here first." And he just starts giving us all of the history of the restaurant, and at this point, we hadn't even told him we were really, you know, doing a book about it. We were just basically talking about ghosts at Universal. And he goes, "Yeah, so let me tell you, this place is really haunted." And the manager just starts talking about it. And so we're both, you know, we're sitting there kind of going, "Wow, this is really cool. We didn't even ask." And I mean, what he was saying, you know, sounded logical. I mean, there wasn't really anything fantastical about what he was saying. It was all kind of fits in with mild paranormal activity, and it was completely unsolicited. And both of them, neither one of them actually knew that we were writing a book about it. So we kind of figured, all right, they really have no reason other than the fact that, you know, we're wearing Planet Paranormal gear. So, you know, it's amazing what people want to talk about when they realize, oh, here's somebody who's not going to think I'm completely insane. So,
Yeah. Now, from hearing the stories and your background, does most of it sound like residual haunting, or does most of it sound like it could be active?
It sounds like a little bit of both, to be perfectly honest. There's one that happens in one of the employee break rooms, and it definitely is not residual because forks were thrown hard enough that they would stick in a wall. There is another tale that takes place in which is now the studio store down in the lower lot, where one of the employees was kind of being spoken to kind of rudely by a customer, and the customer got beamed with a stuffed animal that just came out of nowhere. So you have the ones that sound like a residual, like the one gentleman who had committed suicide. Most of what goes on with him sounds like a residual haunting, where some of the other ones are obviously intelligent hauntings. So I think it runs the whole gamut.
Wow.
I think what we'll do is take our last break, because we're down to only like 35 minutes left. So we're going to go ahead and take our last break. When we come back, we'll continue. And I know I've still got a bunch of questions. Barbara, I know, has got a bunch. And if you have questions in the chat room, feel free to send them over to H. Foister Ceiling Cat, and we will get those answered for you. With that, Geoff, you want to take us out?
Yep. You're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with our guest paranormal investigator and author Brian Clune. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.
And welcome back to the Paranormal View right here on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight and listening from around the world. We appreciate it. We got with us Barbara Duncan.
Still here.
And we got Jeffrey Gould.
Hello.
And we want to welcome back Brian Clune.
How are you?
Doing good.
Still here.
That's good. So, as I was saying before, the 2 hours will go by very fast. So, a couple of questions. I know there was one story that I thought was pretty interesting, and it took place at the Overlook. It's about a man who wasn't exactly right in the head because his girlfriend broke up with him. Won't you tell us about that one?
Well, that's the one that I was just saying before the break that I believe sounds mostly like a residual haunting, because it seems like his actions are always pretty much the same. Now, what happened was, and no one is still sure on how he managed to get a gun past security, because if anybody that's been to Universal Studios in the last like 10, 15 years, they have metal detectors that you have to walk through.
Purses go through.
And I mean, so they just have a lot of security. So no one's really sure how he managed to get the gun into the studio itself, the amusement park. But the man's girlfriend worked at Moulin Rouge, which is a private restaurant inside the amusement park that is for the high-end tour groups, the ones that are given special access. And so they take them to this restaurant and feed them a really good meal. And so the man's girlfriend, who had just broken up with him, worked there. And she had given birth to their child. And all the man really wanted was to be part of the child's life, and she wasn't really allowing it. And I guess it kind of got the better of him, and he went there to confront her with the gun. Now, somebody had apparently seen him pacing up and down the walkway toward the Overlook and had seen the gun, so they ended up calling the sheriffs. When the man saw the sheriffs coming, before the sheriffs could really even do anything, he pulled the gun out and killed himself. Yeah.
Tough to get a refund that way.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult that way, yeah. And so the man has actually been seen since in the children's area of the park, because the Super Silly Funland is right next to where he committed suicide, right next to the overlook. So he's actually been seen in where the fountain is, and it's one of those fountains that just shoots water up out of the ground, so your kids can go and get absolutely soaking wet. So if you have kids and you're going to go there, bring a change of clothes.
Is this the one?
They do have locker.
Is that the ones that's outside in the circle, the little hub area before the AMC with the giant dragon above?
Well, yeah. What it is now is it has. I never watched The Simpsons, but it has this big fat-looking guy on there, and they call it. I guess it's a clown.
Krusty.
And they call it Super Silly. Krusty, thank you. And they call it Super Silly Funland, and it's basically just for younger kids. So it's Universal's Kiddieland section of the park. So he's actually been seen in where the water fountain is, that where the kids can get wet. He's been seen in the locker room area, which is just behind those fountains, which is an area where parents can, bring towels and change their kids into bathing suits and things like that if they so desire. But one of the strangest with that person with that spirit, is he's actually seen coming from the outside of Super Silly Funland, walking under the arch into Super Silly Funland, only going maybe 5-10 feet and then disappearing, and then doing it all over again. So, that is like your typical residual haunting there. But the strange thing about that is no one can ever remember him actually walking into Super Silly Funland when he was waiting to confront his girlfriend. So why his spirit would be doing that after death, we're not really sure. He's also been seen at the Drew's restaurant, which is right there, just sitting at a table. If he's approached, he just automatically disappears. He never really moves. He never really acknowledges anybody's existence. So again, that's almost like a typical residual type of haunting. But where that's concerned, it happens very rarely. So people have seen him. They've seen him disappear when they approach him, but they don't see him very often. But him walking into Super Silly Funland, from what we gathered from the employees, happens quite frequently. And that's the most frequent as far as people seeing this gentleman. And again, people have, reported seeing him in the play fountain and the locker room, but nowhere near as often as the repeated entries into the Kiddieland area itself. So, take from it what you will, whether, that sounds like a typical residual to me, although we don't really know enough about what goes on over in the water park or water fountain area to be able to say it definitively. So.
Now you had one. It's toward the end of the book. It's called Bonnie Vent's story. Now, Bonnie Vent we have on our show ever so often. So I mean we're familiar with her, but the story was pretty interesting. You want to tell us about that one?
Well, excuse me. That one you might have to ask Bonnie about, because she wrote that. And basically, we put it in, and the publisher edited it. But yeah, I found the whole bit with the Munster coach rather amusing, to be perfectly honest with you. Here they drive this custom vehicle from their shop to Universal Studios, and when Eddie Munster gets in there to try and drive it, it breaks down. While at the same time, Bonnie is seeing weird things happening in the facades around her. So I found that whole thing kind of amusing. Bonnie, by the way, if you don't mind me saying it, is an absolutely fantastic person, and we just loved the fact that she agreed to write a piece for the book. It wouldn't have been the same without her.
So this shot that was being filmed for the documentary or whatever it was at Universal?
Yeah, apparently it was for the, she's going to kill me, the 50th anniversary of the Munsters television show.
Right.
And I do remember she was saying that she was extremely bummed that they couldn't go by the old Munster house, which I guess is on Wisteria Lane.
Yes.
And like she was saying, she goes, well, I guess it wouldn't have really mattered because it's no longer even looks like the Munster house. But yeah, apparently they had asked her to be part of the Munsters 50th anniversary. I guess her and I'm having a brain fart. I love getting older.
Yeah, tell me.
Eddie Munster. Yeah.
Bruce Patrick in here?
Yeah, thank you. Now, you see, Butch is going to kill me because we're actually acquaintances. So, Butch Patrick, yeah. I'm going to be getting nasty Facebook messages, I think.
Tell me it fell through the Phantom Toll booth.
That'll work. That will work. Yeah, I guess Bonnie and Butch are old friends, so she was actually a great choice for that. And I guess from what Bonnie was saying, they went by Soundstage 28 on the way out of the studio, and Bonnie, I guess, ran into a spirit that no one really knows about. Apparently an English gentleman. It wasn't the stagehand nor Lon Chaney. So I kind of wish the studio, or the soundstage was still there, because I would love to, be able to see if we could figure out who this other gentleman is that was haunting the soundstage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Universal Studios, they turned a lot of their stuff into theme park.
Well, the theme park's been there for ever. It's just whether or not it becomes an attraction or a ride or something.
Right. But I mean, that's what they did. Now, they've got one like in Orlando, Florida, and I don't know if they've got other Universal Studio theme parks around anywhere. But have you heard?
Yeah, they're working on 2 or 3 more.
Are they? Well, have you heard of any spiritual activity at any of the other parks?
Yeah, the one in Florida appears to have a bit of paranormal activity on some of the rides. The studio Universal Studios Hollywood is the only one where you can still see movies being made. The other ones are strictly amusement parks.
Right.
So that is one thing that is completely different from Hollywood to Orlando to the one they're building in Singapore, is the fact that the one in Hollywood is kind of limited on what they can and cannot build, where the one in Orlando, they've really expanded it and turned it into a much larger amusement park with different types of roller coasters and things like that. But unfortunately, some of those roller coasters have caused some deaths, whether it was due to the ride itself being a poor design, or what most people think, just people who probably shouldn't have been on a roller coaster to begin with. I'm trying to remember the one. It's the Dragon something roller coaster, and that one seems to have quite a bit of paranormal activity associated with it. I kept running into it while doing research on Universal Hollywood, and I actually would be getting more hits about Orlando than I would on Universal Hollywood.
Well,
but unfortunately, go ahead.
They are right close to Disney World. And I know
Correct.
Disney World has a lot of reports of different things happening there.
Yeah. Now, believe it or not, our bucket list is to actually do a book about Disneyland.
Oh, good luck with that.
We've actually been gathering stories from employees. We do a lot of events like Midsummer Scream, Scare LA, and some of the major conventions where we've started doing the Los Angeles County Fair, and it is amazing how many people who either work at Disney or who are ex-Disney employees have come up to us when they see the cover of Universal and start talking to us about the things that have happened to them at Disney. So we're actually compiling stories, and at some point I'm going to be contacting Disneyland. I'm not expecting any kind of positive response from them, but we're going to offer them the same deal that we did with all of the other places that we write about, and full editorial control. But we're going to probably write it regardless.
They'll give the manuscript back to you in Japanese hieroglyphics, and here you go. You can print it this way.
Surprise me. Well, it's like with Universal. Once I got finished talking to the legal department, I told them, okay, well, you know what? We're going to send you the manuscript when it's done. That way you can see that we've tried to treat your business with respect. We're not trying to hurt you guys and, all of that. And we were told, well, you can send it, but we won't read it. So they wouldn't,
save you some.
They wouldn't even read what we sent.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just kept saying, well, it's an unsolicited work.
Fine.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it's not interesting.
And it's like, it's not like we didn't, offer you guys to have it solicited.
Right.
So, we kind of figure we'll get the same response from Disney. But
Have you seen the surveillance footage of the spirit walking around the sidewalks at night at Disneyland?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I'm not really sure what I think about it. I try and withhold judgment on things like that unless I can get my greedy little hands on it and analyze it myself.
Right.
Oh.
So.
Well, what's cool about that is watching it go from one monitor to another.
Yeah.
Barbara,
yeah.
I know you still probably got 3 or 4 pages of questions, so.
Well, I'm just curious as to the type of hauntings that are there, and it sounds like a lot of these seem to be on the newer side. And how far back are you getting reports? Not just of Lon Chaney, but of other people or workers that go back that far.
Well, we have Frank Stites and he's probably the oldest spirit there, and he's from 1915. So it goes back that far. Now, you are correct when you say that most of them are relatively modern. It depends on how you want to look at it, though, because Alfred Hitchcock, he was around Universal from the early 1940s all the way up until he died. So he supposedly still haunts the area where Steven Spielberg started Amblin Entertainment. You have Lucille Ball, who is still seen in the area where her dressing room used to be. So it depends on what you classify as modern. Lucille Ball, she didn't pass away all that long ago, but she has a long history with Universal. So as far as the amusement park and City Walk, those are all fairly new. I think the oldest one that we and that's kind of hard to say too, because you have the spirit in the basement of the studio store that no one has actually seen. No one knows who he is. If it's even a he, it could be a she. So, that one we can't really date. The spirit who likes to mess with the employees in the other store outside of the Harry Potter area. Again, no one knows anything about the spirit, so we don't know whether he's a relative new addition or whether he's been on the around the studio for a long time. The upper lot area was actually never even part of the studio. That was an area that was brought in. They actually used dirt from the Hollywood freeway to build that plateau, so Universal could actually build their first original tour bus area. So a lot of them are quite new. It seems like the newer spirits like to make themselves known a little bit more than the older ones, which could possibly be part of it. So unfortunately, there are so many unknowns, and with Universal not really allowing investigators to go in and try and get to the bottom of who these spirits are, why they're still there, and all of that. Unfortunately, we may never know. City Walk, pretty much all of them are relatively newcomers to the spirit world that we know of, except for maybe the woman in the bathroom. We're not really sure. Well, at least we hope it's a woman in the women's bathroom. It could just be a guy who was a pervert, I guess. But so I guess other than Stites, and we don't really have any ghosts that we know for a fact are from the early days or even the from the mid 20th century, with any kind of concrete evidence.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting now that a lot of films go to locations to do this, and not a lot of I'm sure there's still work on studio lots, mm-hmm. but not as prevalent as it was before. And whether or not that's going to change it.
Well, believe it or not, Universal still has a lot of filming going on. Oh, yeah. You cannot go to Universal Studios and take the same tram tour twice. It's like I was saying earlier, the trams themselves are constantly having to change their routes to satisfy filming requirements. And every time you go on one of the glamour trams, as they used to be called, you will spot at least 10 or 12 different film locations on the backlot.
Nice.
So there's still quite a bit of filming going on at Universal Studios.
But not contract actors the way they used to.
Well, I mean,
Do they still have contract?
When I was working, well, they don't have contract players like that.
Yeah.
But they do have big name actors who. I mean, when I was
I'm talking about
Saving Mr. Banks, we had a set, a street set, looking down to the distance green screens that was able to add depth later, and we had the trams right up within 10 feet of our set. I mean, at the edge of the set, where they would have to wait. They would literally have to stop and wait for the take to be over, and then they could pass through. And they would look over and see us all dressed up in 1910 type outfits.
Yeah, and you still get that quite often where all of a sudden the tram will just come to a stop and you're like, okay, why aren't we moving? And 10, 15 minutes later, off it goes again. And as you drive past, you start seeing the cameras and the all the different lighting apparatus that they use for filters and things like that, and go, oh, okay, so they must have been filming.
Well, normally the tram guy will say, they're filming such and such, so we may have to wait at one point.
Yeah, but if they actually come up to a film that's already been started, then they're not going to get on the microphone. So, like one of the things that I thought was rather interesting, and you will only have this happen to you at Universal Hollywood, not in Orlando or Singapore or any of the other ones they're building. But, and I believe I mentioned it in the book, John Travolta had almost hit one of the trams. And he felt so bad about it that he actually got out. They took the guests off the tram, and he actually spent like an hour, 2 hours, talking to all the people on the tram and taking pictures and signing autographs, and they just had a ball. And, that's one of the things that's really cool about the fact that you have that in Hollywood and nowhere else. I've just always kind of liked that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, gone are the days when it was actually an actor's home, and you pretty much had your career with one studio. That's
right.
kind of, not going to happen.
They would sign you to a long-term contract, and
well,
one of the things.
I was going to say that wasn't always a bad thing, because otherwise we might have had Shirley Temple in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. One of the things that Universal and Carl Laemmle actually did was bring the star system to Hollywood or to the movies. Beforehand, they wouldn't even say who the actor or actress was. They wouldn't give you a name. They would say the little blonde woman or the man with glasses or the guy with the beard, because they were afraid that the star would become more important than the movie, and by doing that, they wouldn't get as much money for movies that didn't have a big name type person in it. Well, Carl Laemmle, when he was battling Thomas Edison and his movie conglomerate with all of the other studios that were attached to Thomas Edison, that's when Carl Laemmle said, you know what, we're gonna start putting the names out. And so, he released a bunch of names, King Baggett and a few of the others that, so he actually developed the star system that we know today, which is why movie stars and, now have more of a,
whole box office draw.
Oh, right. And then it was also Carl Laemmle who first, or Universal Studios, I should say, who first gave the actors and actresses, instead of direct pay, would give them a percentage of the box office take.
Wow.
So, yeah, he really, Universal, that's why I say without Universal, we would have a much different Hollywood than we have today.
Yeah, might be working. Oh, wait. Well, that's why, that's like when Rudolph Valentino died. He was such a big star at the time that women were killing themselves just in grief. And it was like, oh, it's just amazing. I mean, everyone went nuts when Michael Jackson died, but even that didn't match up to when Rudolph Valentino went.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the things that's really kind of sad with Rudolph Valentino and another man by the name of Ramon Navarro. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ramon Navarro.
Not off the top of my head.
Ramon Navarro would have actually made headlines for his murder if the Manson murders hadn't occurred a week later. But Ramon Navarro was actually Rudolph Valentino's protege, even though they were from different studios. And he was also Rudolph Valentino's lover.
Ooh.
And a lot of people don't realize that Rudolph Valentino had a secret life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been kind of secret, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That would have been front page.
Yeah. Rudolph Valentino's at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Peter Lorre is right near him. And a friend of mine did an EVP session in there. And he left his recorder down. And he walked out, got his girlfriend, went back, got the recording, came out. And it was on an analog cassette. They put the cassette in the car while they were driving. And they had to stop when they realized he got something. And you can hear him saying, "Is anyone here?" And you could hear his footsteps going away. And before they came back, you could hear one voice saying, "I can't act."
Interesting. One of the things I would love to do, a lot of people don't know, but Bugsy Siegel is actually at Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Oh.
And I would love to... What's that?
I'm surprised he wouldn't have been in Vegas.
Yeah, a lot of people, it was kind of surprising to me when I found out he was at Hollywood Forever. But I would love to do some EVP work by his grave.
Wow.
I'm going to have to find that. Oh.
Well, our time is zipped right on by.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I do want to thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Hey, you let me talk. That's always a good thing for me.
Yeah. We'll have to razz Bob for me because I was looking forward to razzing him a bit. So.
Well,
oh, you have no idea.
What I want you to do is tell everybody how they can follow you, get your books, and all the good stuff. And we'll have you stay on till we're off, and then we'll talk with you for a minute.
All right. So the books are available at any bookstore. You can order them at any bookstore, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Amazon's actually the cheapest way to get them. You can actually go to planetparanormal.com and order them off of our store. And if you want to follow Planet Paranormal, the best way would be the Planet Paranormal page on Facebook, the one that you have to like, not the one you have to join.
All right. Well, next week we
go ahead. I'm going to cut in one more time. And if you want to razz Bob about not being here, go to Bob Davis. You'll see the Planet Paranormal thing. Send him a friend request and give him guff.
Yep, Planet Paranormal Bob.
There you go.
Planet Paranormal Bob.
All right. Well, next week we have with us Pam Osley talking about aura colors. So everybody drop back by next week at the same time. We will see you then. This is Henry Foister.
Jeffrey Gould.
And Barbara Duncan.
Well, next week, good night, everybody. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.